Connor. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, as the title suggests, we're going to be doing a September wrap-up and an October TBR. Separate from my fall TBR that I just posted, we have more and different books, some of the same obviously, but these are the ones that I'm specifically intending to read in October, obviously. I think we should probably just go ahead and get into it because I have a lot of books to discuss today and I am kind of feeling in the mood to yap. So firstly, I haven't started reading this. This is just the receipt that the Barnes & Noble cashier stuck in here because I didn't want a bag. But firstly, I have The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Lori Gilmore. This is on my TBR, which we are going to be starting with the September wrap-up portion of this video first. So you might be asking, why are you including a TBR book first in this video? And that is because this is my book club pick for the month of October. So if you guys didn't know, I have moved my book club on over to Patreon. I'm going to have the link down below if you want to be in the book club. It is just $2 a month and you will get access to all of our Discord chats as well. However, if you're not interested in doing a paid membership, which is completely understandable, then you can also just join the Discord for free. I have a lot of fun channels on there that are not book club related, but they are bookish related. You can join on there for free, and I would love to have more of you guys on there just so that we can have a community of people who have similar interests and all that fun stuff. And it's been really fun over there so far. So I will have the link to both the Patreon and the Discord in the description. If you're interested, we're going to be reading this book, discussing all the things. So yeah. So like I said, we're going to be starting with my September wrap-up. I read 6 books in the month of September, which I'm actually pretty happy with because I actually moved at the beginning of September. So 6 books is more than I was expecting, honestly. I think I'm just going to go in the order that I read them just to keep things simple. So the first book that I read in September was Evocation by S.T. Gibson. This is not actually the primary, I'm blanking on the word that I'm looking for, but this is not the main cover for this book. This is actually either an Owl Crate or Fairy Loot edition. I think it's Owl Crate. This edition though, can we just get a second for the back? And honestly, the entire thing because it's so good. Okay, anyway, now that I'm done with that. This is actually my first S.T. Gibson book. If you guys didn't know, she also wrote A Dowry of Blood, which is on my TBR, but I decided to go with this one first because it sounded kind of more my vibe. I think that I would categorize this book in the urban fantasy genre is the best way to explain it. It takes place, I can't remember if it's oh no, yeah, it's in Boston. It takes place in Boston. The 2 main male characters in this book are part of this occult secret society in Boston, and they're both vying for the position of Grand Master in this secret society. So these 2 male main characters have a romantic history. They are no longer together and also no longer really have a good relationship at all, even as friends. One of them has since married his wife, and she is kind of the 3rd main character in this book. And the 3 of them have to solve an occult problem that they're having, essentially. I will say this was a very different read for me in terms of some of the content and the themes. I don't think this is really a spoiler. There is a polyamory aspect to this book, so I feel I learned a lot. It was interesting to see the main 3 characters' dynamics in that sense, and their relationship all together definitely made sense to me. But if that's not something you're into, then obviously don't read this book. But it was just announced on Instagram that I think this is going to be a 5-book series, so that is exciting. And I wound up giving this one a 3.75 stars, which I think that a month out I would stick with. Then I finally read Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. This is the first book in the Dreams of, or no wait, what is this trilogy called? I know it has a name. Oh, my Lady Bird bookmark is stuck in there. Okay, I guess it's just called the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series. So this is the first book in that trilogy. You guys know I love Laini Taylor. I love Strange the Dreamer so much. This series has been on my TBR for probably 7 or 8 years now. The reason that I finally ended up reading it is the series is set in Prague, and I am actually going to Prague in less than a week, so I was trying to get in the mood. I will say that the Prague setting in this book is a lot less prominent than I was kind of hoping that it would be, although I'm not sure that that's something that the average reader of this series would really care about because I was focused on that since I'm about to go there, if that makes sense. This book, the premise is extremely hard to explain, I feel like, but basically this is a YA fantasy series. It definitely has this like whimsical vibe to it. Laini Taylor's writing in all of her books is like very whimsical, kind of childish, but not in like an amateur or like immature way. Like it's fun, but there's still definitely some like darker and more adult themes as well. This book kind of has like a good and evil at war aspect, and the main female character in this book is actually on the side of like the bad guys, but she doesn't really see it that way, which that is something that I like really love in a book. And she ends up striking up a romance with an angel who is on like the good side of things. Something that I was not expecting from this book, because it is the first in a series, is that it really goes into a lot of the history of like the war essentially that is going on, and the male main character's history, which is something that I kind of wish maybe had been postponed to later books, because I feel like at the point that was like starting to be delved into during this book, I wasn't like fully invested in the characters to care as much as I would have liked to. But I am still planning on continuing this series at some point. I will say I don't think it's like a high priority thing for me, and I definitely prefer Strange Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares, at least to just this first book. But I still would recommend it. I feel like this is a good fall fantasy read. I gave this one a 3.75 immediately after finishing, but upon having like a few weeks to sit on it, I think I'm gonna go ahead and lower it to a 3.5, which is still like not a bad rating. I just feel like in terms of how much it has stuck with me, I should probably lower it a tad. Okay, the next book that I read in September was They Never Learned by Lane Fargo, which was a Kindle Unlimited read. This book is a thriller, and the main character is a female serial killer, but she's also a college English professor. So basically by day she's a professor, and then by night she kills men. But she's kind of a vigilante in the sense that she is seeking out bad men who do bad things to women. We're talking like abusive boyfriends, husbands, men who essay women. So she sees herself as like ridding society of an evil, and that's kind of how she like justifies her actions. And then there's a dual timeline with a secondary character who is currently a student at the college that the main female character is teaching at, if that makes sense. I absolutely loved this book. I love any book that centers a very morally gray character. I'm not even sure if we can really call this main character morally gray, as she is like, you know, murdering people. But the way that she justifies her actions and like being inside of her head is really interesting. This was one of my favorite mystery thriller books that I have read in a very long time. This would definitely be like at the top of my list of recommendations for thrillers. I thought that the characters in this book were very compelling, which that is something that I feel like is usually the weakest aspect of all mystery thrillers, is that the characters are just kind of like inserts to move the plot and the storyline along, whereas in this case the characters were kind of like what was making the plot and storyline. Like you couldn't have just like replaced them with any other stand-ins and then had the same story, which is high praise for me for a thriller. So I ended up giving this one a 4.25. I definitely recommend this, especially if you have Kindle Unlimited, because you can read it for free. This is definitely like the perfect October read. So if you haven't read it yet, add it to your TBR for fall for sure. Then we had A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Hawley, which I like half read, half listened to on Audible. This is clearly, I feel like, a witchy fall romance read. It was very cute. Our female main character in this book is the daughter of like a very wealthy, very famous, well-known witch family in this town, and she has been like predicted by this prophecy to be the most powerful witch in ages. However, she is like not in control of her magic at all. She really can't do much magic, and she kind of feels like and is treated like a failure by her family. So at the beginning of this book, she is trying to summon flour like for a baking recipe, and she accidentally summons this very powerful, supposedly evil demon who ends up being the MMC love interest in the story. This book honestly exceeded my expectations. I was kind of not expecting much from the writing because of like other reviews that I've seen about this book, so I was pleasantly surprised. I thought that the writing was pretty good. It definitely was like a really cute, wholesome story, and this is a series that I believe has 2 2 other books out, so I will probably be continuing these hopefully this fall, but we'll see because I have a lot in my fall TBR. But yeah, I like this one. I gave it a 3.25, and I would recommend the audiobook if you're interested in reading this. It was a pretty good audiobook. My next read was The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. I had seen so much about this book before I decided to pick it up, which was why I decided to even read it in the first place. This is like a cozy literary fiction, I feel like is how you would describe this book. The main character in this book is a young woman, I think she's like 26, who is an elementary school teacher, and she is trying to foster one of the kids at her school. However, she has not been approved to foster him because she doesn't really have the means to do so. Like, she doesn't have a car, she doesn't live in an apartment that would be suitable for this kid. On the kind of flip side of things, there is this very famous children's book author who lives on an island called Clock Island, and he has written this series. He's basically kind of like the level of fame that I would say J.K. Rowling has achieved in terms of like children's book authors. So like every kid and adult in this series knows who he is, and he decides to host this like game basically on his island with now adults, once children that had visited his island as children, if that makes sense. The winner of this game will win the very coveted and sought after latest installment in his children's book series, and then they can like sell it to a publisher for millions of dollars, and like all of their dreams will come true basically. I thought there were a lot of moments in this book and a lot of quotes that were very sweet. However, I feel like at times the female main character of this book just kind of fell flat for me. Like, I was rooting for her in a sense, but I also was kind of like, I don't know, there were things that she would do and say that like didn't really make sense to me. And I thought that the whole like game aspect on this island felt a little bit darker than maybe it was intended to feel. Like, I kept kind of feeling like one of them was gonna be like murdered and they were gonna have to like escape a murderer on this island. Like, that was like the tone of the story, when in reality it was supposed to be like kind of like a fun, hopeful, like uplifting tone. So I feel like I'm not really sure if like I missed the memo on what this book was kind of supposed to be, but like it was a little bit discordant, I guess. Is that the word that I'm thinking of? So I ended up going with a 3-star for this one. I do still think it's like a fun, cozy read. It's not very long, so you definitely could get through this one in like an afternoon or a night. It's a good one for fall or winter. Just did not meet the expectations that I had based on everything that I've been seeing about it. Okay, and the last book that I read in September finally was The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This was one on my list for 2024 of like must-read books. I feel like this book's reputation kind of like speaks for itself. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I had heard so much about this book. I've heard that it's one of the best fantasy series that has been written in like the last 50 years. This is a fantasy trilogy, and every single book in this trilogy has won the Hugo Award, which is like basically unheard of. So it's safe to say that I had high expectations. I had heard that going into this book, you are going to be pretty confused the whole time, and at the end it's going to be like the best thing that you've ever read, but you're kind of going to be like, what the did I just read? I will say for the most part, that is how I came out on the other side of this book feeling. It definitely, like, this book and this story is a feat. In K. Jemisin's mind, I can't even comprehend like how a human brain can come up with something like this. She's a certifiable genius. I will say I was reading this book on Kindle because I think that it's on Kindle Unlimited. I downloaded it a long time ago, and I know that it was on Kindle Unlimited when I downloaded it, and I think that it still is. So I read this book on Kindle, and when I got to the end of this book, it was still showing that I had like 10% of the book left. Like, I was only 90% of the way through. So when I got to the very last page and I was only 90% of the way through the book, I was absolutely gagged, because there is like a long section at the end of this book that is just all like glossary and index. I don't feel like I can give like a synopsis or a premise for this book because I don't even really know what happened, and that's kind of the point. Like, you're supposed to be reading this book and and she doesn't really tell you anything about the world like in a normal first book of a fantasy series where there's like a lot of info dumping and world building. The world building in this book is not done by info dumping. It's just kind of like you are placed into the characters' lives and you meet them where they are and they're narrating their story, but like assuming kind of that you understand everything about their world. So they're not like really explaining things, if that makes sense. I don't even really feel like I understand what happened in this book. I don't think that you're supposed to until you read the rest of the series. So no synopsis for me, but I will give you a rating, and it is 4.5 stars. I had predicted, and I think like a TikTok that I posted, that this was gonna be a 5-star read, and it almost was, except the ending. I just was like what just happened? Like completely unclear on what happened, which I do think obviously is the author's intention, and I'm gonna continue reading, but it didn't have like that ultra satisfying ending for that reason, and I took off a half star. Okay, moving on to my very ambitious October TBR. I feel like I should probably say that I'm not actually expecting that I'm going to read all of these books, especially because I am going to be in Prague and Budapest for the majority of October, but I will have my trusty Kindle with me, and I'm expecting that it's probably going to get a lot of use just with like travel time and stuff. So most of these books are going to have to be ones that I find on Kindle. Also, we are going in no particular order. So this is one actually that I will not be reading on Kindle because this book has a lot of full color illustrations that I want to be able to experience in a physical copy. But I have Slewfoot by Brahm. So this is a horror novel. I don't really know much about it other than it's like a witchy, spooky horror novel that is going to be perfect for October. I think maybe I'm going to read this one toward the end of the month when I'm back from my trip and I can read the physical copy, like right before Halloween. I feel like would be the optimal time to read this book. I've heard fantastic things. I'm excited. Then we have my current read, which is Get a Life, Chloe Brown. This was another one of the books on my must-read books of 2024. It had been on my TBR forever. I'm 25% of the way through it right now. You guys will be seeing a vlog in which I read this book. I'm enjoying it so far, and it'll be right in October, obviously. Then I have Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Realm of the Elderlings series, which I think is total like a 15 or 16 book high fantasy adult series. I have been seeing a lot about this series lately. I have owned this book for like over 5 years. It's just time for it to happen. I've heard that Robin Hobb does like absolutely fantastic character work, which is something like that's music to my ears. I care most about character development, especially in really long series. So I'm trusting all of you guys that I have seen rave about the series, and I'm hoping that I will get to this book in October. If not though, November or December. Then we have The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. This book came out in April, and I have been saving it for fall. I'm not really sure why they decided to release such a clearly fall-esque book like in the middle of April, but I have been displaying extreme self-discipline and willpower by choosing to not read this book until October or November. This is like a dark historical fantasy that is set in the golden age of Madrid, and I cannot be more excited because I love Leigh Bardugo. Next I have Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I think this is like a lit fic dark academia kind of vibe. No magic or fantasy elements, obviously, though. It takes place at an exclusive boarding school secluded in the English countryside. That's all I really know. I've had so many people recommend this book to me and tell me that I'm gonna love it, so I'm trusting all of you. It's pretty sure I will be meeting these characters in October. Then, kind of in that same vein, I have Sleepwalking by Meg Wolitzer. This has been on my TBR for so long, literal years, like 5+. This is another dark academia book that I don't hear many people talk about, but it sounds like it's going to be right up my alley. The main characters in this book are 3 girls who are essentially in a cult together. They're called the Death Girls, and they're called that because they are each obsessed with the work and suicide of a famous female poet, so like Sylvia Plath, etc. This sounds fantastic. It's, like I said, literally right up my alley, like written for me. I'm really hoping that I love this one. It's a 5-star prediction. Then we have the 3rd and 4th book in the Thursday Murder Club series. I actually don't think that I will probably read the 4th book in the series for a while because I love this series so much. I want to savor it. I read one of the books in the series when I like really need a pick-me-up and something that I know that I'm gonna love, so I'm not gonna try to just like rush through and binge both of them, so I'm gonna put that one over here. But I will be reading the bullet Bullet That Missed soon. This is the third book in the Thursday Murder Club series. If you guys don't know what the series is about, essentially it is about a group of retirees who are living in the English countryside, and they meet on Thursdays to solve murders and cold cases until the murders start happening in their town. Richard Osman's writing is just absolutely fantastic. It's so clever, it's so wholesome. It just makes my heart happy, and I know that this is going to be a 4.5 or a 5-star. Then I have Threadneedle by Carrie Thomas, which I don't know much about. I think this is a standalone adult fantasy. It's set in London's underbelly, and it is like very magical, secret libraries, etc. I have not heard a lot about this from like my mutuals, but it has really good ratings and reviews on Goodreads, so I'm excited to dive into this one. Then we have Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood, which is an author that I've been following on TikTok and Instagram for a while. This is her debut novel, which I think is just going to be like a cozy, wholesome, witchy read, perfect for October. It's set in October, so obviously this just makes sense. Then kind of similar to that, I have Spells for Lost Things by Jenna Evans Welch. This is the author of like the Love and Gelato series, which is like a YA romance series that I was never really super interested in. However, this one I'm very interested in because it is set in Salem, Massachusetts. That is all I know. That is all I needed to know. Anything set in Salem, I will be consuming, whatever that piece of media is. Then I have Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. This is another one that I've been meaning to read for a long time. This is the first book in a YA fantasy series. I don't know a lot about it other than I know that it was getting fantastic reviews when it first came out, and I'm excited to read it. Of course, I want to read Coraline. Coraline is one of my favorite movies of all time, and somehow I've never read the book, even though it is very short and there's absolutely no excuse. So I really want to read the original source material. I think that I'm gonna really enjoy this. I haven't heard like fantastic reviews for some reason about this book, but I think I'm just gonna love it because it's Coraline and it has fun like illustrations in there. Okay, and lastly, I have my only nonfiction book on this TBR, and that is Stiff by Mary Roach. When I posted my nonfiction book recommendations for people who hate nonfiction, and then I asked for other recommendations, I got about 1 million comments about Mary Roach's books, and specifically Stiff. This is about like the history of human cadavers, which is kind of gross sounding, but also I think will be really interesting and kind of like apt for the month of October, because why not? Okay, now moving on to my Kindle TBR for October. We're just gonna rapid fire through this one because, to be honest with you guys, my camera is about to die. But I have The Marlowe Murder Club by Robert Thorogood. I'm hoping that this one is gonna be kind of similar to the Thursday Murder Club, and then it's like set in England, that kind of vibe. I have You Again by Kate Goldbrecht, which is obviously like the cover is giving perfect fall romance. I didn't read this last year when everybody else did, but I want to get into it this fall when I need a romance, obviously. Then I have The X-Files by Jessica Joyce. I don't know why this is giving me fall vibes. It's really kind of looking like more of a summer romance book, but I've heard great reviews. I want to read it now because I make the rules here. I have You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogel, which is another adult romance that I've just heard great things about for a really long time. I have The Obelisk Gate and The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin, which are the second and the third books in the 5th season trilogy. Or no, it's called, what is this trilogy called? It's not called the 5th season trilogy. It is called the Broken Earth trilogy. Hopefully I will get to at least The Obelisk Gate in October. Then I have Nocticadia by Carrie Lake. I've been really wanting to read a Carrie Lake book because I've seen Heather McCleary talking about Carrie Lake a lot and like reading all of her books, so I want to read this one. I know it's like 600 pages, but hopefully. And then the last one on here is my current audiobook read, which is A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. I'm really enjoying this. The main character in this book is the daughter of a notorious serial killer, and her perspective is like really interesting. It's been a good thriller so far. So yeah, that is everything that I read in September and everything that I am wanting to read in October. We'll see what really happens. Make sure you guys check out the Patreon and the Discord if you're interested, and I will see you in my next video.